One, co-teaching is one methodology for inclusive practices. And so we have been historically providing co-teaching professional learning for staff, and it is the Student Supports Instructional Summit historically has primarily been attended by our special education staff. And the more offerings we've been having every year, specifically around inclusionary practices, we've been excited to see the amount of general education staff, as well as school leaders who come with their staff to learn more about it. And so I'm currently working with the broader Student Supports Division, which includes our restorative practices team, our multilingual team, our advanced learning team, as well as our schools team. So I have a partner on this work who is a principal coach, and we are also working closely with curriculum assessment and instruction leadership to make sure that the way that we roll this out is really consistent across the board. We know that we need strong leaders with a lot of knowledge of these practices in order to support their educators to get trained and supported in this as well. So we are providing a lot of the opportunities. We are always expanding our professional learning, and these are for clock hours, so staff can get clock hours to attend these trainings. And so those are some of the ways. For some of our students who have historically maybe been in a lower LRE, more restrictive setting, our program specialists are working with school teams and general ed teachers to make sure that we're reviewing the IEP to determine whether biased decision-making may have played a part in a placement decision around access to general education, and what kind of supports and trainings all staff need in order to successfully support that student so that they can enjoy, experience joy and challenge in their general education environment.
This is Cheryl Lynn. Christy, Christy DeVotter, would you like to ask your question? And I will also just add, Devin has another meeting, and so she will be finished at 7:30.
Thank you. And I'm happy to take follow-up questions, and I will do my best to get responses back.
Thanks. My question was just about staffing and how staffing would be affected with the implementation of extended resource. If I know there had been talks from the special education task force last year about using and I can't remember if it's workforce or workload calculator. And I know that I was just talking to someone in a school today, and they were assuming that was in the plans to be used, but from my understanding, that didn't happen. So I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit to how staffing will be handled, because I'm sure that's top of people's minds.
Absolutely. So right now, what the agreement has been with the SPS and SEA, which stands for Seattle Education Association, collective bargaining agreement that was ratified this September, is that we have specific ratios for extended resource, which model on our access ratios, which is 10:1-3 for elementary and 13:1-3 for secondary. One of our tasks for the task force is to work on developing a workload calculator. So that's one of the priority tasks that we are embarking on as a group, to see where these calculators have been used in other districts, and not just the successes, but the things that we probably need to be paying attention to that could be opportunities for misalignment. So hoping to get a lot more of that information in practice out in our upcoming CBA, but that's something that that's a priority for our work group. So
this is Cheryl Lynn. Well, Devin, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and maybe you could get those with your time. Will students will students with varying needs be eligible to attend option schools that have historically only had resource? So that's one, option schools. And then, we're asked, if you have an access student, do they fall into extended resource? And from Rebecca, new to all this, if my child is receiving SEL support currently, but their school is not listed as extended resource, will those services no longer be available there?
Great. I will start from the most recent question and go backwards, and I might have to ask you to remind me of some of those questions. So Rebecca, happy to help out with this. So students who receive SEL support can receive it in a number of different ways. So a student who has social emotional IEP goals can receive those across any service pathway. Resource, extended resource for next year, focus, distinct. That does not necessarily mean that your child has to go to another school in order to receive those supports and services. However, if your child is served through the current social emotional learning pathway and it's not listed on the linked schools chart, we may have made a mistake. So if you've noticed that, feel free to let me know and I will go take a look and make sure that we have this corrected ASAP. And then the
access goes into extended resource.
Yep, access goes to extended resource.
And then will students with varying needs be eligible to attend option schools that have historically only had resource?
So we are hoping over time to phase extended resource into all schools, depending on varying factors, but our intent is to make sure that we have a continuum of services available for all students in their neighborhood school or as close to their neighborhood school as possible. However, the rollout is going to be a step-by-step process. And so what we have agreed to for the current collective bargaining agreement is the access and SEL become extended resource. And right now for the 23-24 school year, I can't believe we're already in 2023, those services will be provided in schools that have historically had access and or SEL services. So we will be looking as students continue to qualify and students tend to, rise or need an additional level of support, to monitor our numbers and all those various factors to look at expanding those services into more schools. So as of this time, all comprehensive middle and high schools have both SEL and access, with the exception potentially of McClure Middle School, but they have historically had SEL. They don't have an elementary SEL feeder, which is why their population of that class has not always been able to sustain a full program, but that will be an option moving forward through extended resource. For elementaries, I believe out of the 74, I believe about 46 of them are going to have resource or extended resource next year. So that's our kind of starting data, and then moving forward we will be constantly evaluating to see how we can increase access to extended resource across more schools.
This is Cheryl Lynn. Thank you, Devin. I am looking at the time. Instead of being able to get to the rest of these questions, you said, or we were emailing and you said there is going to be there's a big plan or communications plan, because I had asked about maybe an email, on the website, text messages, voice messages, and certainly in person and or virtual.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for that. So for this extended resource rollout, not only will we be posting it on the family websites, adding it to the family newsletter, making sure that our principals and teachers have it. We are also working with our communication specialist to do outreach with this information across multiple channels that families access to get information. So that's something that my team has been working on. I haven't worked on that directly, so I can't give you specifics at this time, but that is part of that rollout plan for sure.
Okay, we'll look forward for those updates, and we'll share them as well. Okay.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you
Devin.
so much. Have a good evening.
And now we're also going to switch over a little more Q&A. We're joined by Director Brandon Hersey and or President Director, and Liza Rankin, who is also Director Rankin, who's also the Board Vice President. So two of our school board members, elected officials who I'll just say are also the only ones I think in the state who do not receive any salary or any wages for their work. Appreciate them spending the evening with us. They're going to be talking about student outcomes focused governance, which is their new way or relatively new way that the district is doing business. So with that said, welcome. Oh, I thought I saw Liza. Where is she?
I'll shoot her a text message, see where she's at.
I wonder if she got bounced out, because I know we saw her come in.
Oh, there she
I'm
is.
here.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
I'm actually going to switch devices though, so that I'm on a hardwired into the internet, because I think that may have been the problem.
And I think we can go, we'll go ahead and go through this as a Q&A that we have worked on some, and also we know some of the many questions you guys have gotten. So why introduce a new governance model? What is or are the problems it's intended to solve, and how does this new model do that?
I can get started with that, Liza, while you're switching devices. Yeah. Oh. All right. You want to take it away? Okay. I'll start with just the first part.
All right.
Okay. You got it. Go
I'm
for
so
it.
sorry.
All right. What do you want to do?
Okay. I am prepared. I promise
I
you.
know.
It's just our favorite technical problems of this time. Why now, and what's it intended to solve? The first thing that I think is really important to know about student outcomes focused governance is that it's not its own different program, or it doesn't tell us what we should be focusing on as board directors. It's a framework that's based on research backed and a lot of studies on what makes effective board governance. It's about helping us understand the behaviors that effective boards exhibit and learning how we can improve our process by adopting some of those behaviors. It also, there's something called policy governance. Cohesive governance, I think, is maybe another sort of name that people have given these different frameworks that don't just apply to school boards, but apply to board governance in all entities. Student outcomes focused governance takes it and specifically, it's the one that's specifically created to align with the work of school districts and school boards. But so that's kind of what I want to say first, is it's not that suddenly the job of the school board is going to be different. It's that we as a board are adopting these practices of effective board governance, and that will hopefully turn into better outcomes for students. And so it's really, it's not a how to think or what to do, but it's a process for being effective governors. The role of a school board is really unique in policy and lawmaking, and it's very confusing to a lot of people, including people who serve on boards, about that you know, we are a body of 7 and we only have authority as a body of 7, as opposed to like a state legislator that has some individual authority, can bring forward bills, can speak as their own individual person on their own points of views. We operate as a body of 7 that represents the vision and values of the community, so that as Seattle Public Schools is providing education in accordance with federal and state law, the values of our local Seattle community are represented in the ways in which the district does its job. And so hopefully this will help. It's helping us, it's helping staff, and hopefully will continue to help everybody understand where decisions are made, the difference in roles between the superintendent versus the board, to make to just help us make better, more effective use of our time, focus on the levers that we do have authority over as a board, and make sure that our power is there and that we're using it appropriately, and that we're representing community well, and that our community can see it in the policies and the way the district operates, that they're represented there.
Okay, thank you. And you were, in terms of talking about students, so Brandon, why is student outcome focused governments better for students, and especially for students of color furthest from educational justice?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, hi, my name is Brandon. I serve as the president of the board, and for 5 years was a second grade teacher, with about 30% of my students each year having an IEP or some form of special education accommodation. So I know that advocacy for students with this classification can be really difficult, and the fact that so many parents are on here almost at 8 o'clock shows your dedication. So I just want to say thank you for having us, and we're really excited to be here. So, and it's not,
I'm sorry, one thing, Brandon, slow down
slowly. Yeah, sorry, interpretation. I'm sorry, I know. Okay, so why is SOFG better for students of color, and additionally students receiving special education services? So as a teacher, what I can tell you is that if the district as a whole does not have a mission and does not have a focus on what we are trying to improve for our students, it's very difficult to inspire educators and to really communicate to the rest of our system exactly what it is we're trying to do. The reason that SOFG is better is because one of the main mantra that SOFG shares is that student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. And we believe strongly that it's very easy to go out and say, oh, like our X school isn't doing this, or Y teacher is the one to blame, when we feel very strongly that it starts at the top with us. And the school board has been really dysfunctional for a really long time. And what this gives us an opportunity to do, as many of you have probably seen through our work sessions or regular board meetings, your president has been a very regular attendee of these meetings, and it's so wonderful to see her there. What this allows us to do is really make the goals that have been set out in our strategic plan smart, right? To be able to make sure that they're measurable, that they're achievable, that they are time bound, and that they actually hold our system accountable. So we've got 3 goals focused around,
how much you read you. I think you read you all this for.
Want to make sure that everybody can hear me. Cool. Okay. Focused around 3rd grade literacy, 7th grade numeracy, and college and career readiness. And all of those goals have sub-metrics in there, which we can talk about at some point. But the reason that it's better is that it actually gives us an opportunity to see on a regular basis through progress monitoring sessions that are delivered by the superintendent how well we are doing in those areas, right? So as you know, if you do not have a budget for your household and you're just spending money, and you say for yourself, I want a goal to spend less money, and you're not keeping a budget, it's going to be really difficult to understand in what categories you need to spend less. With SOFG, this really categorizes our work as the top end of the system so that we can better support our educators and better support your students and children and you as families with a very clear picture of where our system is headed, so that we can make sure that we are improving the outcomes, and to be very specific, the academic and educational outcomes for all SPS students, with a special focus on students receiving special education services and students furthest away from educational justice.
Thank you. Appreciate that, and appreciate the speed. I am now pulling up my notes. I was grabbing stuff. Okay, so Liza, how does student outcome focused governance better align the district operations to support that strategic plan and goals?
Well, Brandon sort of, I don't know if this was on purpose or not, but teed us up very well to lead into this question, which is has to do with SMART goals. Really, the strategic plan goals, we didn't change those. The strategic plan was still in effect when we took on shifting our practices to this framework. But the goals were they were a little bit more broad and kind of aspirational. And what this framework does is really discipline us to put specific measurable outcomes on those so that we can all see, okay, here are our goals. How are we doing in making progress to those goals? And then staff should be, the superintendent should be directing staff to align with making progress on those goals. And as it works its way down to buildings, we're all holding each other accountable for the same outcomes. One thing that I kind of like to remind myself as a person with ADHD and as a board director is that the board that's focused on everything is focused on nothing. And when we had these sort of like, we should do this and we should improve that and we should do that, and everybody's working hard and trying their best, but it was really hard to tell what was having an impact, where we could improve, where more investment should be made, what things maybe should taper off that weren't, supporting students in the way we needed to see. And so the framework helps us really direct from the high level, the moves that we need to make and how kind of getting everybody on the same page and working towards those same goals and outcomes for our students. It doesn't mean that the other things that might seem extra or that people like aren't important, but it's all in service to how do we meet these goals and support our students.
Okay, and then as I'm jumping back between screens, how will the student outcomes focused government, or SOFG, how is that going to work in terms of student-centered decisions during the budget process?
That's such a good and timely question. As many of y'all know, we are in a budget crisis, so to speak. Just for context, Superintendent Jones has directed senior leadership to cut about $36 million from the John Stanford Center in terms of program, personnel, and lots of other things because we're trying to minimize the impact on classrooms, though some folks will feel that. I think SOFG's timing of coming to Seattle Public Schools could not be better because in these really drastic situations, it gives us a level of focus to know what areas are SPS staff and students succeeding in that we need to continue to fund, and what areas do not have the same level of impact that we could maybe put to the wayside, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that, the things that we decide to not fund aren't important, but given the goals that we set out for ourselves, prioritizing and making sure that those things are well resourced is incredibly important to ensuring that we improve those outcomes. So the way that you'll see student outcomes focused governance show up in those decision-making conversations is quite literally, is the program impacting students positively? Are we getting improved outcomes or is it not, right? And being able to have clear metrics on how various programs or various expenditures are directly impacting student well-being and student outcomes really does give us as board directors a clearer vision of how we should be funding certain programs and certain things within the school district. What it also gives us the opportunity to do is to look at how our operations are delivered to our students and families as well, right? By understanding the intersection between what the physical, like arrival environment and things like that of school, how those things play into a child's ability to not only learn, but to feel safe while doing so, we did not have a clear way to kind of delineate how those things interact with one another as we are making these decisions before. And now we do. So it really does give us a much clearer picture about how our decisions, especially those that are focused around funding, impact students in the classroom in a way that we just didn't have that level of clarity before. So it's actually been super helpful for this very unique and very pressing budget cycle for the school district.
This is Cheryl Lynn. Thank you. The part of that in terms of the understanding how things work, the committees don't exist anymore. The meeting structure is different. So that access for the public to understand maybe some of the conversations. Liza, you want to address that?
Sure, yeah. And so committees are temporarily suspended. We will be revisiting as a board this spring whether or not we want to permanently change the structure, which permanently, like, board policy is always an ongoing process. So permanently for us would mean we as a board would say, okay, yes, we suspended them and now we're going to actually like change that policy and eliminate them. Another board later on could redo it. So nothing is ever set in stone. That's what's so great about representative government, right? And that it evolves and changes, or is supposed to. So I will confess to loving a committee. I love a committee. A lot of you on this call know that I like to talk often and a lot about all kinds of different issues and dig into all kinds of stuff. In the board context, though, what we found was that having standing committees is actually a really uncommon practice across school boards across the country, and even in Washington State, having standing committees, not committees at all, but standing committees. And that committees' best practice is that committees of the board should be focused on board work. Yana, I see what you just said. Committees should be focused on board work and should have an end date. So if the board has a specific project or something that they're working on, that so ad hoc governance, we had an ad hoc governance committee, for example, to develop recommendations to bring to the full board about adopting the framework. That is something that, you know, it's the work of the full board, but it needed some more intensive work done by board directors that didn't need to happen as a group of 7. So we made an ad hoc committee. That committee, we gave our recommendations to the board about board work. The recommendations were accepted, and the committee ceased to exist. What we found with the standing committees is that they were using a lot of staff time, for one thing. So staff that we pay a not insignificant amount of money to do work on behalf of our students. We're taking a lot of that time to provide information to the board that would then also later be provided again in a full board meeting. That's just not a good use of time and resources. It also, and I'm as guilty as this as anyone, created a situation where the board was actually being encouraged to engage in the work of staff. Now, separating the work of staff and the work for the board doesn't mean that the board's not allowed to ask questions, but when you end up in a situation where board directors are interested in something, or something comes to their attention and they spend, Brandon's probably gonna laugh because I use this as an example all the time, 25 minutes of a 2-hour board meeting talking about the type of lock set that's going to be purchased for doors. That is just so beyond the level of what school board directors should be spending their time on and the time that they should be demanding of staff. We need to focus on policy and directing the district to operate in a way that aligns with the vision and values of the community, not micromanaging and second guessing decisions that we honestly don't have. I mean, I actually happen to know probably more about lock sets than is reasonable, but you know, the conversation was around a bunch of people who are not locksmiths or engineers or security, you know what I mean? And so it's that the committee structure really encouraged that type of questioning and discouraged broader questions about how our students are doing and how our one employee, the superintendent, is implementing the things that the board has directed and is making good on providing education to students. So I know some people are worried about like, oh, we don't have transparency anymore. The committees ended up being really duplicative of like, oh, this is really, either it would be something that was like kind of down in the weeds and didn't really need to be a board discussion or meeting, or it would be something that I would actually like stop people in presenting the committee that I chaired and say, hang on, I'm actually going to ask that we just move this to the full board so that the full board can participate in this discussion, because it would be something that really like, especially since the committee that I chaired was student services, curriculum, and instruction. A lot of the meat of what the board should be spending most of its time on was coming through that committee. And I realized like, we're really taking the opportunity away from the public to see the entire board engage on this issue, and also missing the opportunity for all board members to have this information together at the same time and to have this conversation as the body of 7. So yeah, I was a little bit like, oh, but committees, I love committees. But it's actually really made our time together more effective and productive. And also been like, it's not about staff, it's about kids, but also staff wouldn't have to present to 3 people and then present again because 4 people weren't there. And, you know, it really didn't serve to advance, although it's interesting, and not that there wasn't valuable information. It didn't help support the most effective work of what we should be focusing on a board in terms of holding the district accountable to serving our kids.
This is Cheryl Lynn. Thanks, Liza. And I know Brandon has already looked at some of the chat questions. I'm going to ask, the next question we have was, what engagement does the board do to ensure you're really representing the visions and values? And I see that asked in various ways in the chat, concerns about, you know, well, I'll say it, students with disabilities are a small percentage, and although fully intersectional. And the reason that we spend a lot of time in this area is because there are a lot of questions about accountability.
So many questions about accountability. So just let me say from jump, even though I am not yet a parent, right? I have worked with students who have gone for years without receiving their proper IEP accommodations from their 504 plan. And there is nothing more frustrating than being an advocate. And I couldn't even imagine being a parent and knowing your child is legally entitled to these services that they are yet not receiving, right? There is no amount of words that I could say in this space that would make any of that okay. But what I can say is that through Director Rankin and I, we are 100% here to partner with you to ensure that we can figure out some policy solutions here, right? Let me answer the first question, and then I'll double back to the question that I heard in the chat. So the first question is around engagement. I think that what we are about to stand up is probably going to be one of the most single effective committees that the board has ever instituted. And it's a committee that is 100% focused on how do we effectively do community engagement. There are so many barriers for the 7 of us to serve all 45,000 students within Seattle Public Schools and to engage with you as families, right? We do not have staff, we do not get paid, and any engagement that we plan is either in collaboration with groups that is already existing or is on us as individual directors kind of doing our own thing. That is not a sustainable model. That is not like solid community engagement. One of the big kind of tasks that this new committee that is about to be stood up in the next few days or a couple of weeks here, we're just trying to square schedules at this point, is a community engagement calendar. A lot of what we know is super important to community, things like budgets, CBAs, school consolidations, as I've heard, as I'm sure you've heard of, are all on a regular timeline, which means that we know some of those big things like transportation issues, boundary changes. We know that those things are going to need to be discussed at certain times, sometimes even as far as 3, 2, 1 year in advance. And so by putting together a community engagement calendar, we can be more proactive in getting feedback and having two-way communication with community instead of always being in a retroactive stance and getting one-way communication from, say, someone coming and giving testimony at a board meeting. While we love that, right? Please continue to do it. That doesn't really give us a great opportunity to be able to communicate and have a conversation and build understanding between one another, which is really, quite frankly, the foundation for how change is made, right? So through this, my vision for the community engagement calendar is not just what, are the important things as the district, but also an opportunity for groups like the Special Education, PTSA, and others to submit requests to meet with board directors. So by submitting a request to us, we can work with you to find a time that maybe as many as 3 board directors can come and engage with you. And it doesn't just have to be like once a year, for groups like this, for the Seattle Council PTSA, for the NAACP, groups that advocate for the students that we are trying to lift up the most, it really does give us a framework to be able to have more regular communication and not just start talking when something has gone terribly wrong. Because by that point, we as board directors may not have a ton of options to support you, as well as the train may have already left the station so quickly that it might be difficult to fix. So what we're really trying to do is front load our work and build community so that we catch any type of issue early, so that we can work on policy changes and revisions together, and hopefully avoid some of the catastrophic experiences that happen, especially for our students who are receiving special education services, because we all know the systemic issues that come along with being able to serve these students that need more than general education students. I want to double back to the question that we had in the chat, and I'll read it for those who haven't gotten a chance to take a look yet. But it's essentially saying, when you are looking at student outcomes, are you considering students that have left the district likely because they have not been served? And the reason that I asked for some follow-up there is because in my mind, there are kind of 2 paths here. We have students who are still with us, who very much so need our attention. And then we do have the very real issue of students leaving the district for a number of reasons, right? What I would say to that is that I would love to have a deeper conversation so that we could build some understanding around what that would look like to you. Because as a non-parent, and especially as a parent that, or rather as a non-parent of a special education student, there are so many of those experiences while I might share as a teacher that I'm just not going to have. But I will try to answer your question to the best of my abilities, because I don't want to just say I want to talk more and here's my number, and then it just goes out into the ether. That doesn't help anybody. Through student outcomes focused governance, what this does give us an opportunity to do is to see very clearly where we are failing. We get regular progress monitoring sessions with the superintendent, as I mentioned earlier, and he's bringing us data that is showing us very specifically how Black boys with who have intersectionality in special education, students of color who are furthest from educational justice who have that intersectionality, we can see that data broken out on so many different levels that it gives us a clear indication that, like, okay, while this, particular intervention or program is working really well for X group, what we can see here is that it's not necessarily impacting students who are receiving special education in the way that we would want. And that allows us as a board to be nimble in asking and holding our, one employee accountable to, like, when we, have these sets of metrics and we have these goals for the students that we're trying to support, we need to be able to see very clearly how this is not only supporting one group of students, but how this is supporting this group of students and all of the intersectionalities that come along with, what that means. The last thing that I would share is that we as a board are building a deeper understanding of what it looks like to not just serve Black boys, right? But what does it look like to serve Black boys with special education needs? What does it look like to serve Black boys who might speak English as a second language in their household? And the reason that I mentioned that very clearly with that focus on Black boys is that we believe strongly, and I heard this from the first time from the Black Youth Project, is if you can focus in on the students who are suffering the most, right? The students who have that intersectionality with so many systemic issues that are going on within our society. We believe strongly that high tides raise all ships. That doesn't mean that we're not also paying special attention to special education students who might not have those intersectionalities. But what we believe is that those interventions that work for Black students who might have that intersectionality will likely also work for white students who are receiving those types of services as well. That's not going to be the case for every student, but as a board director, we're trying to make the most impact with the resources that we have. And I'm super sorry if that's an unsatisfying answer. I'm not going to profess to be a professional, or rather an expert in this area, but I am incredibly excited to continue to have these conversations and share space with y'all so that we can make better policy decisions and have less students leaving the district because they cannot adequately be supported in whatever classroom setting they might be, right? We want to make sure that we are retaining and meeting every student's needs where they are, regardless of their educational status, but also making sure that we are honoring the commitments that we've made through individualized education plans. And I just want to be the first to say that I know that that is not happening and very rarely happens to a T in Seattle Public Schools. But it is a high priority for both Director Rankin and I to ensure that we improve that by the time, somebody else is occupying the seats that we sit in.
Yeah, can I actually add to that a little bit?
Yeah, please.
When I started my advocacy life, the district used to give a lot of annual reports to the board that were just about students. All students, one category, like we have had this many complaints, or we have had this many levels of improvement in this thing, but it was not broken down into student category and goals. So what the board focuses on and prioritizes is what the district is going to focus on and prioritize. It doesn't happen overnight, as you all know probably better than anybody else. Shifts take a painfully long time, but we have adjusted policy to specifically call out improvements in certain areas for certain students. And when we get these progress monitoring updates, we can see, like, I think I saw Sherilyn said something about graduation rates, that when we first started getting progress monitoring updates that didn't include IEPs, and I threw a little mini tantrum about, like, we need to see that data separated out to understand that in almost all of our areas, students with IEPs and students who qualify for language support are like the bottom. And that tells us something really different than just looking at all students together. I mean, like what it tells me is that, you know, students with disabilities are not getting the access that they need to general instruction through their services, and same things for language services. That's hard to ignore when you see the data broken out like that. So that's something that is shifting in the way we are asking for data and reports from how they have been in the past. There would be a lot of reports about different departments. And I want obviously our operations to run efficiently. I want transportation to be effective, but none of it matters if we're not doing our job for our students. And so that's what I want us to be talking about with the superintendent, and for him to be providing to us how we're making progress for our students. On-time transportation is great and important. And we didn't build a school. We don't have a school district to bus students. We have a school district to educate students, and busing is a function of that. So that's kind of, I guess I'll just say again, what the board focuses on is what the district will focus on. And that's why it's important in who you elect for the board. I wanted to add something. Yana, I think, asked a specific question, or maybe it was, oh, sorry, I apologize for not saying my name. This is still Liza speaking. Yana, no, or was it Cheryl? Oh, actually, I don't know who it is because it's under the special education PTSA name, but about the reports on the inclusionary practices that came to student services curriculum and instruction. That is a really good question, and I've written it down because as we are adjusting our processes, a hole that I have noted that I'm really eager to work on, that we have some work sessions coming up about the board superintendent relationship, is also about information sharing between us. So I definitely want to find and document a way for that type of information to be shared with everybody, even if it's not in a committee meeting. The other question that Yana did ask was, what are public board meetings for then? They are legally required. So
this is Yana. I did not ask that. I asked, what are the meetings for, meaning public meetings? Meaning any public meeting?
do you mean community meetings, or do you mean our board meetings?
Well, this is Yana. I don't want to interrupt you. I will let you finish and then I will ask my question.
Okay. What I read the question as was wondering the purpose of the public meeting. So when you see regular board meeting on the agenda, that's not going to change. Regular board meetings we have to have, and they are referred to as legislative meetings because there are certain things that we are required by state law to adopt or approve in a public meeting. And the reason they're public is because also as a board of 7, and the reason that we have, committees and quorums and worry about too many board directors being in one place, is that we are supposed to do our business of the board in public. Brandon and I, even if it's just 2 of us, Brandon and I can't say like, oh gosh, we have to vote on this thing. What do you think about it? Oh, I don't know. What do you think about it? I was going to vote no. Yeah, I'm going to vote no too. We need to have that. We're legally required to have deliberation and conversation publicly. And so that's why they're televised. That's why we sit in that awkward on the dais, and it seems very official. That's mostly just to provide access to the public, because as the representatives of the community, you need to be able to see that we're making decisions on your behalf in a way that that you thought you were voting for, basically, and also just to make sure that there's no sort of like collusion or wrongdoing. So even posting, like I post stuff on social media usually as information. Hey, this vote's coming up. Hey, this thing is coming up in the state legislature. I will not post this item is coming before the board and I have these questions about it and I'm trying to decide how I'm going to vote, or I'm going to vote no. That's totally inappropriate, because that deliberation needs to happen in public, and it's also legally required to give the public a chance to give testimony about certain things. And so some of those regular board meetings are formatted in a really awkward way because we have these legal compliance pieces. But even if we didn't have specific board actions that we had to take, we still need to do our business publicly. And so when committees went away, for example, we don't now do committees in private. We just don't have those conversations. We have them as a full board instead. It's just shifted when and where it happens, but it's always public. I don't know if that's what you were asking, Yana, but that's what I read.
No, this is Yana, I'm not. But maybe somebody else was wondering. So my question really is,
That was so generous of you.
yeah. So I really would like to understand, because I am still wrapping my head around this. What I keep hearing specifically from one board director is that the language used, and I won't be able to replicate that because I understand it the way I do, and then it just sounds and sends a message to families, including mine, that we don't really care what parents have to say. We do care about what the students have to say, right? Now, to me, and this, I'm going to be very blunt, and to me that sense feels like I am not respected as an equal partner and as a representative of my minors, and that I would have my their best interest in mind. Because I will say why, okay, and I don't want this to be taken in the wrong way, but because these things come up as, I keep hearing, we can't have public meetings. That's what I'm wondering. If parents bring issues to the board directors, what is the purpose of the public meeting? We do engage, but then you can't really do anything with the challenges other than policy. So I guess this is like an input for, maybe if my child is in crisis and I'm not getting anywhere, then maybe once you update the policy in 6 months, some other child might actually, their parents might be effective advocates for their child. That is very bluntly, very simply put, right? So that was my, and the other form, the other angle is that you are unlikely to hear from my kids or other parents' kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yes.
I am their spokesperson. And, I keep hearing like, well, people want this and people want that and parents want this. We need to really focus on students. That sends a kind of like a dismissal message to the parents' role. And specifically for the disability community, that's kind of for insulting, for a lack of and disrespectful, for lack of a better word. But, I would like to not be considered less important than my child, because if my child didn't have him, SBS would kill him and he would die. Like, I'm not exaggerating. So what I would like to see the parent voice to be strong and respected. And I'm not understanding if we do go to public meetings with the board director, because we want to be heard and we want some changes, clearly, that we care. And we're in crisis a lot of times. We're desperate, right? To help our kids and help our, to support our teachers who are not supported enough to support our kids. I just want to know, like, how does what I share with you make it to my kid? How does it make the round, I guess?
Yeah. Can I take a crack at that, Director Rankin?
Go for it.
So if this year has taught me anything, it's the commonplace existence of what is called a dialectic, right? Like many things can be true at the same time. While I can't, you know, I'm not, I can't speak for other board directors in the way that they communicate. Like, I do think that there is some truth in both perspectives, right? 100% you're accurate. Like, for students who are receiving special education services, is that okay? For students who are receiving special education services, while we as a board are uniquely focused on student voice, that doesn't create space for every student in that way, right? Whereas we need folks like their parents to be able to communicate with us and to know what's going on. At the same time, on the other end of the spectrum, as a Black man living in Seattle who's originally from Mississippi, there are a lot of white parents here who will speak on behalf of their children who do not have the best interests of the rest of the school community in mind, right? And so we as board directors have to be able to parse out those things. And if it's a wholesale approach, that's just unacceptable. You are 100%, in my book, very valuable partners in that right. At the same time, Seattle does have a very long documented legacy of a very small section of our population that has had an immense amount of access to folks who are in power at the school board. And so what I see as steps forward is being able to separate those things, right? It can't be a wholesale approach in either way. It can't be exclusively student voice and it can't be exclusively parent voice. But what that requires us to do is to be able to engage and to become better partners by doing things like this so that we can fully understand our communities that have nuance, so that we can also understand that by creating space for students and by rejecting some of the historic access that many wealthy parents that don't look like me have, we can't also reject access for parents who are their students' primary advocate. And those things are like really hard to untangle. And we're not perfect. We are human beings just like you, right? Some of us, like, are, for lack of a better word, are really learning on the job. And so all we can do is to say, yeah, your experience is 100% accurate and true. And I'm sorry that you've had it. But what I can offer is what, you know, I can control myself, because I'm the only person I got control over, is to continue to learn and to continue to work to separate those two things out. Because the last thing that we would want is to say that your experience as a parent, especially for a student who's receiving special education services, is not valued or does not matter, because for us, that could not be further from the truth. But language and the way that we communicate, as we just saw in the chat and by my misstep, is super important, right? And so all I can do is say sorry that you've had that experience, and that, you know, the only way that we're going to fix that is to continue to learn about your community and how we can best support you. So,
And I'll just add to that too, that student outcomes just means that everything is in service to what students need. And a big part of that is engaging families. Like, there's all kinds of family school partnerships. Oh, I'm sorry, this is Liza speaking. Family school partnerships. There's tons of research to support that, parent engagement and family involvement improves student outcomes. So one thing though that I heard that might be what's coming up too is I think people have been conditioned when at the building level or school level, something's not working the way it should and the service isn't being provided, that it's come to a school board member. None of this work in our shift of our framework says that you can't do that. But the important thing about the role clarity is oftentimes we're actually not the best person to help meet the specific need. And there's some verbiage that I don't totally love, but haven't found a better way to say it, is thinking about customer engagement versus owner engagement. And like I said, I don't totally love those words, but haven't thought of a better way to describe it. But basically, you know, specific issues of customer engagement should be happening with staff, your teacher, your principal, ultimately the superintendent. Owner engagement, as far as like, hey, here's what we envisioned for public schools. Here's what we as a community want for our public schools. That is the level that we have access to implementing more. That doesn't mean, I mean, I have individual people come to me often where they're just frustrated. They're not sure who to talk to. They don't know where to go to. They come to me because they know who I am, or they live in my area, whatever. And I can try to untangle, why is this not working? Who do you need to talk to fix it? But that's a really clumsy way of operationalizing things. And a lot of people that need support don't have access or don't feel comfortable reaching out to me. Or I say, gosh, that is a really big problem, but actually I have no idea who at your school is the person who should support that. So one of the things I said earlier was about the board that focuses on everything, focuses on nothing. The other thing that, because I have a lot of personal relationships with lots of people, I want to get in and help and like fix the thing. But something that I've trying to remind myself about too from this level is that the time that I spend intervening on behalf of a specific student or a specific incident is efforts that I'm taking the opportunity and responsibility away from the system and the staff people that are supposed to be doing that. And that's something that I think, again, it's not for the acute needs right now that you all may be experiencing, but in trying to build a better system, focusing on accountability where it needs to be and responsibility where it needs to be. And trying to understand too the difference between a signal and noise. Those individual things, I can sort of sometimes gather those and be like, whoa, this isn't about a person or an interaction in a specific building. This is something systemic, and there's clearly something wrong in our policy that's not addressing this need. When it gets more granular, it may be faster and more satisfying in the way we have been operating to ameliorate something. But like, hopefully what we're pushing the district towards is a better foundation that actually has accountability and responsibility where it's supposed to be, and that it shouldn't be up to chance as to whether or not you will be in a building or have a teacher that will support your kid. It should be by design. And right now it's not. And so that's really what we're trying to get to is, by design, students are served where they go to school by the people who are supposed to serve them.
This is Cheryl Lynn. I want to just make sure we get to a couple more questions. So Dustin, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Dustin Cole. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a teacher in Seattle Public Schools. I got this invite and it seems like I'm still kind of learning what all this is, but it seems appropriate that I'm here. I've been teaching distinct now for 10 years, 3 years in Seattle. I love it. And the kids and the students are amazing. And I don't know the situation that Janet was discussing, but the families and parents are so important because all of my students, for example, this year, none of them can say any words. Like there's no verbal language. And, you know, they're in kindergarten through, you know, first, second, third grade. And so, you know, as the teacher, I need to find a way for them to communicate. And oftentimes there'll be so much going on. There could be unsafe behaviors and, you know, other situations of lack of staffing. And it can be very stressful. And when my students go home, and I want to say, like, we do amazing work at my school. We have really great days. We also have some rough days, but my students don't have the privilege of coming home and telling their parents how they feel, what happened, what they're excited about. They don't have that language. And my hope is, I know it takes time, but my hope is that we can get enough support, especially for distinct, because I know we're such a small part of the system, but our students have such vast needs and such big impacts on families. One thing that we're piloting, but we don't have yet, is curriculum. So there is no curriculum that it continues from, pre-K through transition, that can be used by teachers in a systematic way where we can plan and create. And so every day our students come home, but what are they learning? Like, how are we able to communicate with families what's happening? Like, they just have to trust us a lot of the times, and hopefully we communicate enough. But I think there are real ways that we can support teachers and classrooms and students to give them a voice. And one is by providing all of our teachers with access to systems like Boardmaker and Symbol Sticks so that we can modify curriculum, we can provide visuals. And then also a curriculum that we're piloting right now is the unique learning system. And this can track data. It's adaptable for kids who need switch buttons to engage, to students who can verbalize and read sentences. And I just, in order for us to really show that all students care, that all students matter, like, we have to be able to lift up our students furthest from justice. And those are especially like the Black and Brown students that I teach in distinct. And I want them to have curriculum. I want them to be able to transition and graduate and go into middle school and be learning the same concepts through the same system. And parents can watch what's happening, and it's possible.
It is. It totally is.
They're doing it in a federal way.
And in Shoreline, the previous district I worked in, and and I can just say from my experience, like, we're piloting it and it's great. And I get the feeling that a lot of teachers aren't really as interested because we often get access to it middle of the year, or there's no trainings. And so if we were provided the same opportunities as general education teachers in these trainings and time to plan and collaborate, then we can provide more systems and transparency of what's happening with our students. And I appreciate all the parents, because I need them to help build up my students' voice as well. And I just got this link and I'm just kind of jumping in, and so it's just something I just really want. I think distinct really needs more love. We need some love.
I know this is off topic and not, but I'm so, I can't help it. Sorry, Brandon. This is Liza talking. I'm so happy that you came here tonight, Dustin, and that you shared what you did, even though you may have come into the meeting after it started and not come to talk about the governance framework. That is a huge hole and a huge issue, and something that is desperately needed in Seattle Public Schools. It's something that I talked about in our last progress monitoring update. I can't remember, but where the question that I asked was, in student IEPs, because we see graduation rates and other measures for students with IEPs be so dramatically lower than other student groups, how much of that is connected to student goals in their IEP not even being tied to grade level or age appropriate goals, that we are by design lowering standards for students with disabilities. And so, and that to me is totally unacceptable. And so I'm really, thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to use that also to sort of justify myself in saying how many teachers in special education need access to resources on the general ed curriculum, in specially designed curriculum to support students with needs that may not be able to access the general ed curriculum, and then more time to collaborate with general education teachers. I mean, this is basically just inclusion, and our system for such a long time has been very siloed, and the students that you're teaching, and thank you so much for being part of that school community and doing that work. They have not been cared for. They have not been given attention. And inclusion is the way forward. Anyway, I could go
Let's hear, this is
going, but-
Cheryl Lynn. This is Cheryl Lynn. Let's hear Yuki's question.
I don't know how to describe it's because it's been I'm trying to communicate to school for 10 years. My daughter has ADHD, and I understand. English is my second language, and I'm not grow up in American education culture. So I asked many people many way for 10 years, and I never fail. I got answer. This community is always very supportive. It's just I know personal stuff shouldn't be on table. More general talk is appreciated, but I just try to understand general frame today. I just feel like my daughter is junior and never get services except sit in front of teachers. And this time she's officially evaluated other places. We requested evaluation because I learned there is a system she can be evaluated if we cannot afford. And middle school days we requested, and I talked to many school teacher and a huge meeting, including assistant principal, but she just was denied. And my husband have ADHD, frequently lose job because he's challenging managing a lot of stuff. And then 2 years he was out of work when remote learning days, and we just did as much as we could to educate our kids. And finally he got a job a year ago, and we felt since she will be junior, and when we want her to continue education, we just let her evaluate because we feel been stuck for many years. And when she was tested last November, she has ADHD and dyscalculia and dyslexia. And I mentioned up, she cannot calculate, she cannot read many times 10 years to school. But since we are not have detailed, we were diagnosed 5th grade, but we didn't have a detailed description. I know a lot of other her friends get services, but she was more suffering, but she couldn't. And we finally find out, and I submitted to school, but again, I don't really feel like she's getting service. I just then last week my husband lost job again, laid off by economy, and since now we know what she needs help, and based on the advice, neuro evaluation person's advice, she definitely need one-on-one support of math. And we've been paying out of pocket even if we had to recover by economy of our house. but now we are out of job again, and we gotta stop when she started to slightly understand more, like then she also was told she need to figure out dyslexia. She reads book, but we find out when she pull out the word, she is not reading the word. She just can guess a lot because we let her just sit in front of book many ways for 10 years, but actually phonics she doesn't understand. And this time scientifically data wise, really we are clear what I've been sensing for 10 years. But I understand overall budget is affected, but it's just so since she will have one more academic year, just economy is bad timing, and just give up for her other talent she has. What happened at Lincoln High School is remote learning days she get A on the math, but when she got standardized test after back to school, she get level 1. And my daughter feels she's doing well in the school and well in the math, but when officially tested, she has a huge gap. And when she tried to move on after high school, she really have a lot of things to catch up, but it's just, I just don't know what to do. It's just 10 years I've been talking teachers all the time, requesting a lot of communication, but many times we just don't hear back. And I kind of description officially we get is I've been saying from my point of view for many years. I'm impressed. My daughter is 10 years. She doesn't give up going school. She wants to see friend, and also she find out she doesn't take medication because my husband in and out of jobs because he has same thing she has. And what we found out is when she exercise, her brain function better to produce her own chemical. So recently she wanted to function better, want to have better relationship with teachers. She work out before go school, and she kept on doing it because she can focus better. But that made her running too much, and her iron level dropped to 5. And now it's a very dangerous situation, like better not to move too much because iron shortage. I just gotta worry about she doesn't do over exercise, try to succeed in class, because she felt that's the only way she won't be yelled at class. And I just, and now we gotta worry about how to feed. And I just how I can communicate with school, because I tried many times, and I just want to keep not just mine, but like her many times try to communicate. I just want to be heard, the struggle they can't do. I don't care 504 IEP if it's helped. It's just a hard because of the system, voices are not heard. Students say, I can't do this, I don't understand this. She actually go up to science and math teacher when the day she cannot calculate because of the brain is too tired. 4 times calculate when it's not much. She just talked to teacher, probably my dyscalculia kick in and I can't solve this. Can I come back tomorrow? And science and math teacher doesn't know what dyscalculia means, and she has to explain. It's just a lot of time and effort to accomplish one thing, and I'm proud of my kid. She still try to advocate herself and try to stand up, but not every student are like that, and I just want simply reading and simply calculating, um, any form if it's helped. There are a lot of kids who can move on and proud themselves and engage better, and in the future bring back economy to where they live, I believe, because I all of them have talent in another way. So I just supposed to meet with schools soon, but I just don't know. Is it there is nothing she can get? Just wait until uh I just don't know. Um I just no matter what economy situation, there are kids who need support, I feel.
Yuki, thank you for sharing, and know that you are not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone because you're with this group. You are also not alone because there are a lot of people here who have had similar experiences, and we will help. And I'm glad you're here. I will be spending a lot of time thinking about your daughter and you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's probably a pretty powerful way for us to end. We truly appreciate both of you being here. The candor of the conversation. It is nice to have a conversation and not testify in front of a microphone and then not hear anything. As I referenced board testimony. And we have collected all the questions and comments that we've gotten in the chat, and we'll be sharing those, and would ask you to share them with board members.
Absolutely. Can I just say one thing before
Yes,
we
please.
hop out? So I just so first off, thank you, Yuki, for sharing that. Just wanted to share a moment of vulnerability. So like my mom was a teacher, taught high school forever, and was my biggest advocate. My second grade teacher was like convinced that I had something going on and tried to retain me. And my mom was just not having it. And what I say all that to say is my mom passed away when I was 12. And so I didn't have that educational advocate. And I just got diagnosed with ADHD myself like 6 months ago. Never received that support in school. And so the frustration that your family is feeling, and like I can only imagine the frustration that your daughter is feeling, but to still show up every single day going to school and trying her best, that's powerful. And the impact that you have had on her, not only as her parent but as her advocate in spaces like this, I can just see the look on your face of how exhausted you are dealing with this incredibly broken system, and the transference of that is palpable. So for I know my words are worthless in this sense, but I am just deeply sorry that your daughter has not gotten the support that she's needed, and that you have had to fight for 10 years to get what she has now. And there's nothing that Director Rankin or I, especially in this moment, are going to be able to do to make that better. But what we can commit to is to continue to sharing space and community with y'all. And hopefully, we'll be able to take steps in the right direction. But I just wanted to share that like that is not lost on us, because specifically for Director Rankin and I dealing with, similar things, it's just astounding to me that our system is not better equipped to be more responsive and supportive for our students that need it the most. So just thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. And I know that was difficult and it took a lot of courage. So from the bottom of my heart, I just really appreciate you having the guts to share that. So thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll move to a couple more things before our 9 o'clock. Appreciate it again.
Always.
Thank you. See you again soon.
Thank you.
Oh, this is Cheryl Lynn. I will jump just to, I'm going to do a couple of slides. We'll get to sharing with folks that we've got a couple of different activities that are coming up. Saturday, a watch party. Encourage you to join us. You can find this information on our website under calendar, and you can also connect to our Eventbrite page. Our dyslexia committee has been doing some great programming this year, and this month they're going to be providing programming again for parents and for professionals, 2 separate nights. Effective reading interventions for parents is next Monday night, the 13th. Also, and we'll have, Jana will speak to this a little bit, Friday or February 20th, Monday is Legislative Advocacy Day. If you can make the trip to Olympia, highly encouraged to do so. And then for any of you, our Sip and Chats, this will be an open discussion. Sip and Chat does not have the formality of a meeting. It is really about how we can connect with one another and help support and solve problems as possible. Okay, with that said, I will, Jana, would you like me to work your slides?
Yes, please. This is Jana. I have just because we only have now, looks like 11 minutes, I'm going to go fairly quickly, not by speaking, but by possibly jumping to other, skipping some things. So what I might do is to just link my script, because I worked off of scripts due to my disabilities, into the chat, so that if you miss anything, it's going to be right there with all the links and everything. Only because we are so limited. So I want to share that I am the Seattle Special Education PTSA Legislative Advocacy Committee Chair. I had to read that. I guess it's late. And because I will start kind of, yes, we have a February 20th Focus on Advocacy in Olympia Day by the Washington State PTSA. This is for any PTSA member, and you can sign up on Eventbrite, which I think Mel is going to share in the chat, but I'm going to say maybe Mel, just share the whole document and basically people can look it up later, because I think it would be too much work. Anyway, so now would be the time to schedule meetings with legislators for the advocacy week, which is the week of the February 20th through 24th. And you can schedule virtual meetings or in-person meetings. If you are coming to, excuse me, to Olympia, Washington State PTA has a room and reserved, and speakers which include Dr. Tanya May, the Assistant Superintendent of at OSBI, who is in charge of special education. You can read more about that on the Eventbrite. And then there is a really helpful form, really helpful, I guess, one pager that will help you schedule meetings, how you schedule meetings with legislators that Washington State PTA has. What you should really do, if you haven't yet, is sign up for advocacy newsletters from the PTA. They're very helpful. You know, we do our own blog posts on the most important bills, but I will say that it is a pretty heavy lift. So if you are thinking of joining any committee I would appreciate, we would all appreciate if you wanted to, and we're interested in legislative advocacy, so we can share more information. But the other thing I want to share, if you are following, if you are interested in following bills, there are two bill trackers that I talked about in December or January meeting, I guess. One is specifically focused on education. That's from League of Education Voters. And one is from Disability Rights Washington. That's about anything disability related. And let's see. So like I said in the chat, I will cut directly through to the chase here, because today is Tuesday, and on Thursday, there is a really important bill in legislature that's being heard. The main sponsor is Representative Jerry Paulette. It is a legislation requested by OSBI, and it eliminates the arbitrary special education funding cap, which is currently 13.5% of enrollment of students. So that's basically, you can't get more funding, and that's how we get what we pay for, right? The state gets the kind of education for our children that we see and experience. So it removes the cap, this bill removes the cap, and it increases the funding multiplier, which we went over in January. I'm not going to get myself wrapped up in this because I have some other things to say, and mostly some of we really need your support. We all need everyone's support. So please do share and ask others to also sign in pro. The things that you can do is sign in pro on the legislative record and sign up to either testify remotely or testify in person. The people in person actually usually get priority. I do know that it is not possible for a lot of people, either accessible or affordable. I also can't afford to go to Olympia, as you know, I would have to just stay there, I guess, and camp. And so remote testimony is a great way to participate. Then you can also submit testimony in writing. One tip that I find, if you sign up to testify and there's a lot of people and you don't, you might not get called. So one tip is, if you are preparing testimony, make sure that it's 2 minutes long, and then prepare one that's only 1 minute long, because you might just get to say very little. But then you get to actually submit your whole written testimony, and you can add to it if you need to the committee. The House Bill 1436 is in the Appropriations Committee, which, you know, of course, is all about money. And so when you're writing your testimony, please focus on that part. Focus on why it is important to provide funding. You know, say special education is basic education. What do your students need? You know, that goes from various things: evaluation, services, funding for training, professional development, staffing. Do share your story, because stories move mountains. So just share how your child, your family, your students were impacted. Bring your kids. You can also have kids. I had my kiddo submit a written testimony. Took us only 2 days to write it, but it's, you know, it's a way to support and foster advocacy in our kids, because they're going to need it for their life. You know, remind the committee, the appropriations committee, that levies are supposed to be the extra, not for not to be used for basic education. And most importantly, equitable access to education. Limiting funding for education of disabled children is just a no, right? We need to remind them that it's just a really bad thing to do, and children are not numbers, right? They have needs, and we cannot limit them. So I think that is pretty much it. There's other bills, but I'm not going to get into it because we only have 2 minutes. We also have a blog on our blog. There is a post about the House Bill 1479, and which has the same bill is same wording, same bill is in Senate 5559. So there will be some more updates. So please keep an eye. If you would like to join our committee, we also have we also have the sign up sheet for us. I think we are nearly out of time. I do want to save the couple minutes for if anybody has a question. And if you have a question like 5 minutes from now, I can also hang out for a few, not for too long, but for a few. We can always reach out to us at hello@specialeducationptsa.org, or reach out to me at advocacy.seattle@gmail.com.
This is Cheryl Lynn. Thank you, Yana. Laura Marie, do you have a 2-minute that you could talk about in terms of fundraising? And if not, that's fine. Oh, good.
I surely do. Thank you, Sherilyn. So I think everybody here in this meeting is fully aware that the special education has spent a year putting together that guide and trying to welcome families into special education and help families find their way. And our group has really gone to great lengths to try and include as many people as possible. And that, of course, includes translation services. And the guide is,
I'm sorry, this is Charlene. Laura Marie, your audio is cutting in and out a little bit.
you know, I need a new computer. I'm going to slide forward and see if you can hear. Basically, we are looking to pay for more guides. We have principals that are asking for more guides in their schools, and we would like to print some more. And we also have the translation services that we need to pay for to keep our meetings and keep that guide accessible for as many families as possible. So as you heard in our meeting tonight, we are coming up against the stereotype of the special education parents. And we are really, as a group, doing our best to reach as many families as possible and to help as many families as possible. And of course, our PTSA meetings are for Seattle people, but the guide can be for anyone, any PTA across the country. So we really are hoping to reach more people. And to that end, we will need money to print more guides and, like I said, pay for the translation services. So what we're working on is an ask for our community. And if someone has money that they would like to donate, that would be really helpful. But what we really are looking for is to turn our PTSA into advocates. And just like Yana was talking about, going to Olympia, advocating for these bills. And the same thing is for our guide and our group as a whole, telling everyone you know about it, letting them know that the guide is there and that it is free and that it is for them, for anyone that can use it. And also that we need help paying for this. So as an all volunteer organization, we really do count on those donations. And if Like I said, if families would like to contribute, that would be lovely. But what you can do that has even greater impact is share with people that you know. Tell them what it is we're doing. Tell them why we need money to support more families and more languages. And tell them how special education and this PTSA has impacted your life and the life of your child. So we are really looking for partners in all of this. And I hope that we can count on all of you to join us.
This is Sherilyn. Thank you, Laura Marie. And we are going to adjourn the meeting and let our interpreters go. Thank you so much. I will be able to stay on for about another 10 minutes if people want to stay and bring up any topics or discussions. Thank you. Oh, and we've been recording.